Mr. President, in the aftermath of last week's mass murder in Orlando, which took the lives of 49 people, we saw where the American people stand on gun control. We know that gun safety is essential to making a safer, more secure America. An example of what went on in Orlando after that terrible morning. People stood for hours in long lines waiting to donate blood. People attend large gatherings to express their united grief. People left flowers and figurines at the scene of the murders. In cities across the country, people stood at candlelight vigils to honor members of the LGBT community and the Latino community who were slaughtered. Here in the Capitol, Senator Murphy stood on the floor of the Senate for 15 hours, demanding that Congress act to stop gun violence. And in Florida, families and friends of victims stood grieving at graveside services for their murdered loved ones. And where were Senate Republicans? Where did they stand? Yet again, Senate Republicans stood with the National Rifle Association. Yesterday, the leader of Gun Owners of America, the shadow organization of the NRA, said he believed that people should be armed in bars and taverns. That's what he said. And last night, for the third time in as many years, Senate Republicans stood with the NRA in blocking common sense gun legislation that would keep firearms and explosives away from suspected terrorists and other dangerous individuals. Senate Republicans proved again that regardless of how brutal the massacre or how reasonable solution, untimely, it doesn't matter. There's never a good time. Their actions will be dictated by the National Rifle Association. A CNN poll released yesterday, 90% of Americans support expanded background checks. 85% of Americans support legislation keeping guns away from suspected terrorists. There's one reason these proposals were not already law: the National Rifle Association, because they oppose anything dealing with guns. How can Senate Republicans side with the NRA and against American people? 90% of Americans support expanded background checks. If you're a criminal or a crazy person, you shouldn't be able to get a gun. 85% of Americans support legislation keeping guns away from suspected terrorists, but the NRA doesn't support that. So Senate Republicans don't support it. Here's a little secret for my Republican colleagues. NRA doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about your constituents. It doesn't care about the constitutional rights of the followers. The NRA and its leadership care about two things: making money from gun manufacturers and making money from the NRA and selling more guns. NRA wants gun manufacturers to be able to make more guns. Never enough. NRA wants to have more firearms sold. More guns sold means more money, more donations for their bottom line. During times of crisis, when Americans should be coming together to find these common sense solutions, what does NRA do? They raise every dollar they can by spreading lies and fomenting these conspiracy theories. The mail's out, folks. Go to your mailbox. Direct mail is their specialty. They circulate false direct mailers to their followers. For example, Congress is trying to take away your guns, or President Obama wants to confiscate your firearms. NRA uses that money to fund ads against candidates who refuse to bow down to the gun lobby. Taking a page from the Koch brothers' playbook, NRA uses so-called dark money to influence elections through mysterious front groups awash with undisclosed campaign cash. NRA says they're spending the money to protect gun owners. But let's be clear what it's really about. It's about protecting the power of the National Rifle Association. Since the Supreme Court's misguided Citizens United decision, NRA has tripled its political spending to support their radical agenda. But Republicans in Congress don't acknowledge any of this. Senate Republicans pretend the NRA is simply a grassroots organization working for America's best interests. Nothing can be further from the truth. This is false. NRA used to advocate mandatory background checks. It used to encourage reasonable legislation to keep guns away from dangerous individuals. A month after the Columbine shooting in Colorado, where all those two young men killed a lot of innocent people, Wayne LaPierre, the executive vice president, National Rifle Association, the man that goes on TV all the time, justifying what they do, testified before a House Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime. Here's what he said, and I quote, "We think it's reasonable to provide mandatory instant criminal background checks for every sale at every gun show. No loopholes, anywhere, for anyone." Wayne LaPierre said that. Now in 2016, it's a different story. Just yesterday, this same organization pressured Senate Republicans to vote against closing the loopholes he said should be closed. Senate Republicans voted against the Murphy amendment that would close loopholes in our nation's background check system. Senate Republicans voted for Senator Feinstein, but no, that's what we had hoped. In fact, they voted against Senator Feinstein's amendment that would have closed the terror loophole. The terror loophole, which simply allows suspected terrorists to legally purchase weapons and explosives. We believed it should be closed, but it's not. The loophole's still there because Republicans followed the NRA mandate. That's how strong NRA's hold on Senate Republicans is. Republicans won't even agree to keep guns away from terrorists. The Republican Congress has become so thoroughly indoctrinated that it's now the legislative wing of the National Rifle Association. And while Republicans do the bidding of the NRA, innocent Americans are being gunned down in schools, in churches, in nightclubs. How many more mass shootings will we have to endure before Republicans realize that they're being used by the NRA? How many more people have to die before Republicans come to grips with the fact that the NRA is only concerned about its bottom line? The American people are looking to Congress for leadership. They're hoping that we'll do something substantive to protect our communities from gun violence. But the simple truth is that we cannot protect the American people and protect the NRA at the same time. Public safety demands a solution that prevents dangerous people from possessing weapons, while the NRA exists solely as a fundraising vehicle for more guns, more bullets, and fewer safeguards. So it's time for Republicans in Congress to defend the people who sent them to Washington in the first place and put the personal safety of their constituents over the needs of the NRA. It's time for Republicans to tell the NRA, enough murder, enough carnage, enough guns.